Hello, everybody. How are we doing? I am just trying to get the font size just a little bit bigger so that I can see everybody. And for some reason it wasn't working just now, but it looks like it is now. How are we doing, everybody? Good evening, good morning, and welcome to the show Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham. Hope everything is going well for you guys and you're having a great week. I've had a mixed bag of a week. There has been some not great stuff going on and quite stressful stuff going on, but at the same time, I've also had some really, really cool things going on as well, which I can't fully talk about yet because the really, really cool stuff isn't 100%, whoops, smacking the mic, yeah, they're not 100% set in stone yet, but as soon as they are, I will be able to talk to you guys about that. So maybe next Sunday, I might have a little bit more information about those kind of things for you. But yeah, some of the not so good things, I'm not really going to bore you with because I'd rather not. I'd rather not talk about it. But yeah, it's been quite a tricky week this week. And I've had family over from Chicago for the last couple of weeks. I think I maybe mentioned that in the last show, that I got family here. And so it's been really busy for the last couple of weeks. So I didn't get a video out this week because I was just all over the place this week. My parents stay across the river, the 1st to the 4th. They stayed over there in a little town called Burnt Island. And so my family from Chicago have been staying over there as well. So we've been constantly hopping back and forth, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and we've been to loads of places and done lots of fantastic things. And it's just meant I just haven't been here a lot, so I have not got a lot done. So apologies for not getting a video out, but the video that was meant to go out this week will go out this coming week. So this coming Thursday, I should be able to get it up for you guys. Johnny needs to add a bubble machine graphic for this music. That's very, very cool. Yeah, that's a piece of mine called Flip Flops. If you've ever wanted to know what that piece is called, it's called Flip Flops. And I wrote it when I was at university doing my degree. I did a joint degree. It was jazz composition and arranging and audio as well. So I did a full audio degree and a full jazz composing and arranging degree. And so Flip Flops was one of those pieces where I had to write something to order for a specific setup in a specific style. So that's kind of like in a 1940s bebop style, which is what it was. That was what the remit was, to write it for trumpet and tenor saxophone front line with rhythm section. So that's kind of what I came up with. So yeah. And it's based on the I Got Rhythm Changes, kind of. I kind of changed some of the chords a little bit, but it's essentially based on the chord changes to I Got Rhythm by George Nara Gershwin. So there you go. So that's what that song is. I'm gonna get to the chat just now and see who we have here. And then we're gonna make a start. So Thomas was the first one here. He was about 20 minutes before everybody else, which is awesome, Thomas. Thank you very much. By the way, I hope all the audio sounds okay, and that we don't have like hiss and stuff like that. I would really appreciate it if you guys could let me know about the quality of that. Because I have had to change some of my settings. I've had a vocal coach over here working with my daughter for a couple of days this week. My daughter is in the National Youth Choir of Scotland, and she has one-to-one vocal coaching. And so the vocal coach has been in here and has quite naturally changed some of the settings for the microphone outputs. And so I've had to go back and change those. So I need to make sure that everything kind of stays the same. So Thomas Mickelson was first in the door 20 minutes before everybody else. And then John Lake, Just Bob is here. He says, celebrated 50th anniversary of Woodstock today by playing some video footage from it this afternoon. Still not sure how Shana Na got on the bill, though. Is there a way to change your name in here? The name that you have in the chat is the name that you set for your Google account or your YouTube channel. So you'd have to do that there. You can't change that in the chat. You'd have to do that with your own account. Give me one sec. Just Bob says, go to your settings and you should be able to change it from there. If you don't see it, look on YouTube and it's changed there. Okay. Yes, that's pretty much how you do it. Okay, let's go down. Greg says, is Johnny running late? Yeah, I was a little bit. I needed to go and I was just about to hit start streaming and then was just like, I need to go and use the bathroom. Typical. But yeah, that's what that was all about. So, hey Greg, how you doing? I hope you're okay. David SJ was talking about the bubble machine, and his royal facetiousness is here, and he says, "Here's Johnny." Yep, that's me. Lyle Gallant is here. I think it's Gallant, or is it Gallant? I'm not really sure. But yes, he is here, and he says hello all twice. Let's see. And Booth Mixing and Mastering Service. That'd be my good friend Bobby Booth is here, and he has been in on pretty much every Sunday Night Live we've done, right from way back when I did my first couple of streams, which were awful. I have watched those streams back, and they are pretty awful. Not just in terms of the quality of the picture and everything else, which was rubbish back then because I had a really, really rubbish internet, which was actually too slow, really, for streaming. And now we have a much better setup, and we have much better internet, and I've got much better lighting as well. So a lot of things have improved, and Bobby has been here all the way through. So thank you very much, Bobby, for being here. I really appreciate it. Michael Johnson is here. Nice43 says, hey Johnny, how are you? I'm good. I'm tired because it's been such a busy time recently. I've regularly been getting home at absurd o'clock at night. So yeah, I'm pretty tired, but I'm okay. David says audio is top notch. Oh, you guys are responding to what audio sounds like. And you're all saying it's pretty good, which is great. That's what I like to see. Who else do we have? Lowends is here. RJ Hagler is here. He says, greetings from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city. Awesome. And, of course, my good friend Woodbeast is here. He says, hello, all. And Larry Curry says, thanks, Johnny. Well, good to see you, Larry. I appreciate you all being here. So we have a pretty good amount of you here, which is great. I really appreciate every single one of you coming out tonight on your Sunday evenings to take a wee bit of time out to watch my show. I really appreciate it very much. If you like my show, please hit the like button. I really do appreciate all of those likes. They do make a big difference, and it helps my videos get up the search engine in YouTube, and also it means that sometimes my shows actually end up on the YouTube homepage. I know a couple of my shows have done that, and then I've gone and watched I've gone and looked at the analytics after the fact and seen that actually one of my shows has had like nearly 500, nearly 600 views, and after the fact views tend to be about 130, 140, so sometimes they are getting right promoted up there. So do hit that like button. I would appreciate it very much. He says, greetings from AL. Where is AL? I'm not really that up on the initials for various states in America. I sometimes get them mixed up and confused. Sometimes I know that IL is Illinois. And LA, what is LA? Is that Louisiana? LA? I think it is. Alabama, there we go. AL is Alabama. That makes sense. Some of them really do make sense, like AL for Alabama. That makes sense because it's Al for Alabama. Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. But yeah, some of them don't. I realize that. So I appreciate that. RJ says thunderstorms and Jonny L. Perfect Sunday evening. Thunderstorms are awesome, and we have had some epic ones just lately. I think I told you about the one last week where we had about 6 months worth of rain in about 3 hours. And we had some pretty extensive flooding. I have never seen rain like that before. It was incredible. Visibility was down to less than a foot. The rain was that heavy. It was incredible. Really, really heavy rain, and then just the most spectacular thunderstorm. That was great. Lowen says, just had storms as well in Akron. Awesome. Woodby says, good name for a band, the Thunderstorms. Yeah, absolutely. His Royal Faces says, print out a list of states for reference. Not a bad idea. I should probably do something like that. See, kind of here in the UK, we don't really talk about states and counties, even though here we have mostly counties, is what we have in the UK. So we have, counties like Cornwall, Devonshire, Somerset, Berkshire, Hampshire, Yorkshire, and all of that, Sussex, Surrey, and Aberdeenshire, and West Lothian, and all of West Lothian, East Lothian. These are my local ones: West Lothian, East Lothian, Mid Lothian, and then of course you have the city of Edinburgh and all of that. So we have counties, but we don't really talk about them that much. If I'm going down to Manchester, we don't say I'm going to Manchester, Lancashire. We don't really talk like that here. So for me, making sure that I get things like states in the US right, I think is good for me because it's good for you because that's how you guys relate, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, I am just waffling a little. So let's get into tonight's subject, which is keeping our mixes on track. How do we keep our mixes on track? There's a whole bunch of methods I employ personally that I'm going to suggest to you tonight. So none of them are complicated. Most of it is common sense, and most of it is dead straightforward. And I bet most of you are already doing at least one, if not two or more of these methods that I employ to keep my mixes on track. How do I do it? Well, the first thing that I do is approximately every 10 minutes, I stop. I know it kind of sounds obvious, but I stop what I'm doing and I roll my seat back and I listen. I keep my volume of my monitor station quite low. So basically my mixing level is kind of round about average, what I would call average conversational level. So I don't mix with my speakers up really loud, but even so, your ears can still fatigue, even if you're not mixing at a loud volume. you can still get fatigued, and you can still kind of lose track of where you are in your mix, and you can start making bizarre decisions if you've been going for too long, and start adding all sorts of effects and all sorts of EQs where you really don't need them. Which is why sometimes, you know, you can be working on a mix and you get to the end of the day and you are absolutely convinced you have a totally banging mix that, you know, has you dancing at the back of the studio. It's that good. And then you go to bed and then you come back in the studio the next day and it's just like, what on earth is that? That mix is all wrong. How do we avoid that? You avoid that by you have to find ways to maintain your objectivity and your sense of perspective. So when I get a mix, or I get asked to do a mix by a client, usually what I ask them to send me is not just the multi-track files, but I also ask them to do their own rough mix and send that to me as well. And that becomes my reference track. And then I say, also, send me a song that you like, that you know and love, that you would like your song to sound similar to. And that gives me a target to aim for. So I have kind of their rough mix, so basically how they would like it to sound. Now, it's not, you know, their rough mix is not necessarily going to be a fantastic mix because they might not have any mixing skills whatsoever. But I'll say, you know, even if that means you just balance the faders and you do a little bit of panning, that's fine. So send me a rough static mix. And that gives me some idea of, you know, which elements of the mix are most important compared to others. So you know, they may well have one particular guitar thing that is just up front. It pokes out more than all the other stuff. And that makes me go, okay, that is a featured instrument. Plus you've got the vocal, which is obviously a featured instrument if it's a vocal song and not an instrumental. And then, you know, I'll listen through to the whole mix and I will make notes about what the client considers to be an important element of the mix. And those are the things that I want to highlight and make unique and make special in the mix. So I will treat them differently to the way I treat anything else in the mix. So a reference track, which is a song that they would like, ideally, my mix to sound like. That's my reference track. I have two reference tracks. That'd be one. And then their own rough static mix is my second reference track. So every 10 minutes, I stop what I'm doing and I compare where I'm at with my mix to their static mix and the target reference mix. And that helps me. That's one way in which it helps me to stay on track and stay focused and not get sidetracked and start doing weird processing that's just not necessary. So that's kind of method number one. And I call it the 10-minute rule. So I set a timer and I'm pretty strict about it. Every 10 minutes I have a timer. I set the countdown timer on my phone. And when the alarm goes off, I stop. And I compare my mix to the two references, as I say. And when I stop and I'm comparing, I'm not allowed to touch anything in my mix. I'm not allowed to make adjustments. I need to sit and listen and make notes on my comparisons. And then I look at my notes and then I go back to work on the mix and I start making those adjustments that I have noted down that helps me get towards my target sound. So that's one approach. My second approach is that at that 10-minute point, and after I've done my little A/B and I've made my notes, I will walk out of the studio. And I will listen to what my mix sounds like down the hallway and in the lounge, which is Lounge is just kind of out that door and straight next door. So that's where the lounge is. So I will listen in the lounge as well. So I'll put the mix on loop whilst I go in, make a fresh cup of tea or something. And I'm listening to how it sounds in there, because if all I hear next door is loads of bass, then I know, my bass is a little out of whack. And I can come back and fix that. So the hallway test is another good one. And also the fact that because I'm out there, everything is effectively collapsed to mono anyway. And because everything's collapsed in mono, that's another way to do a mono check. So, as I say, checking your mix in mono regularly is another good approach. Even if you're not actually mixing specifically in mono, which is something that I do. I do mix in mono. Even if you're not doing that, every 10 minutes or so when you're doing your kind of your 10-minute stop, your 10-minute pit stop, I guess you could call it. Yeah, why not call it a 10-minute pit stop? Excuse me. Check the mix in mono. Take a couple of minutes out just to listen to key points in the song and check them in mono, and make sure that you can hear every element of the mix. If you've got elements of the mix that are disappearing when you collapse to mono, then the suggestion there would be, hey, you haven't quite finished EQing, because there's some masking going on in the mix, and that's something you need to go fix. So those are my two main approaches to making sure that I keep my mix on track. Every 10 minutes I stop and I A/B, and I also take a little bit of time out. I take a couple of minutes to go and make a cup of tea, and I will play the mix whilst I'm elsewhere in the house for a minute or two, and then I'll come back in here and get back to work. So regular breaks, regular A/Bs, until you are at the point where you think, okay, this mix is really, 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 really coming together. And that's when I get to my next approach. So I've got approach 1, which is the regular 10-minute A/Bing. Method 2, or approach 2, is to listen to it down the hallway. And method 3, when I get to the point where I think, yeah, this mix is really coming together and is beginning to sound really, really good compared to my target reference mix, my target reference track, and I'm beginning to think, yeah, this sounds really good. Then the final thing that I do is I hit play and I roll all the way back, or I get up out of the seat and I go stand at the back of the room with my notepad and I make some more notes. I listen to the mix all the way through from start to finish, and I make some notes about anything that kind of sticks its hand up and says, I'm not fixed yet, I'm not ready yet. And I make notes of those. And then I go back and I make those adjustments. And then I rinse and repeat until there is nothing on my list. Everything is scratched off. And I stand at the back and I go, I can't think of anything. Nothing's sticking its hand up. Nothing's saying it's out of balance. It's not quite ready yet. Final check in mono. Final check against the original artist static mix. Final check against the reference mix. And if all of those things, I still have nothing to do because there are no notes on my notepad, I know I'm done. And the mix is finished. So I've covered kind of two things here, really. How to keep on track, how to keep focused, and not drift off into kind of doing all sorts of stuff that's not really relevant to the mix. And also how to know when your mix is done. And then after that, I go into a quality control phase. What is my quality control? My quality control is I listen to the mix all the way through on my speakers. Then I listen to my mix all the way through on these. And then I listen to my mix all the way through on another set of headphones. I use the PreSonus HD9s, which are tracking headphones, but I listen to it through there. And then I check them against my crappy, $1 earbuds that came with my phone. I'll listen to it through those as well. And again, I make some notes. Is there anything that particularly sticks out on my earbuds that I'm not really hearing in my headphones or not really hearing in my speakers? And if so, I can adjust that in the mix until that goes away. And then I do the quality control again. And then I'm pretty much done. If it sounds great on these, great on my speakers, great on my other set of headphones, and great on my earbuds, I know it's good. And I can send the draft out to the client. And most of the time, what I get sent back in terms of feedback from the client is very, very small minor adjustments to make. Like, oh, I'd like maybe a little less reverb on the guitar. Fine, can do that. Or I want the vocal to be a little bit more mid-rangey in the chorus and a little bit less in the verse. Again, that's something I can easily do with a little bit of automation. And so then I generate a second draft mix. And that's pretty much how I stay focused and keep myself in check when I'm working on a mix. So I hope you found that really helpful. And I've not really shown anything in Studio One. It was much more kind of like something that I wanted to talk about and share my approach. And I think what it'd be really good for us to do now is if in the chat you could post some of the things that you do to, the approaches that you do. What do you do to keep yourself on track? What do you do to stop yourself drifting away and kind of just making adjustments for the sake of making adjustments? How do you keep your objectivity? How do you keep your perspective? What is it that you do? Do you have different methods? Get them in the chat and then we can talk about those. So let's go and do that. Get posting away, folks. And I'm going to go and have a look at the chat from the last point I was at. You guys have been talking a lot. Let's see. Bobby Booth says Illinois used to be ILL, ill. Yeah, I can see why they would change that. That's a good idea. Israel Faciousness says saw some great videos from Scotland of folks body surfing down the street. Yes, that was in Aberdeen on the, I think it's Aberdeen that was taken on the high street. I think it was. Yes, that's hilarious, isn't it? That's exactly what we do in Scotland when we have extreme weather. That's what we call fun here. Let's see. Lollipop Guild is here. Hello, how are you, my dear? And Lollipop says, storms last night, unplugged electronics and had a great sleep after. Perfect temps lately. Cool. Peace Valley Audio is here. That's my good friend Mike Neighbor. He says, hey, Bob. Let's see. Yeah, you guys are talking. Let's go down a little bit in the chat and see what else we've got. Lollipop says, great topic. Thank you very much. Hope you found it useful. Let's see. Lollipop says, I've done that, know exactly what you're talking about. Cool. Low Ends asks, do you prefer to mix the music tracks or get a stereo mix of the music track? Do you prefer to mix the music tracks or get a stereo mix of the music track? Well, I work mostly in acoustic music. So folk, jazz, and acoustic pop music. That's kind of where most of my work is. But that's not to say I haven't done other stuff as well. I do rock music sometimes. I do some R&B and soul, but I haven't really done kind of any music I don't think I've done any mixing where it's been doing a music track and then a vocal dubbed on the top of it, like you would for some R&B and some rap music. Haven't done that, but to take your question a slightly different direction, I do leave the vocals until last when I'm mixing. So I will get a really, really good sort of band mix, if you like, of all of the instrumental elements. So, the rhythm section, any horns or strings or anything else that's in there, I will get that all done first. And when that sounds really, really good, then I will get to work on the backing vocals. And then finally, I will get to work on the lead vocal itself. So the lead vocal is kind of like the element of the mix that I get to last of all. And there's a reason for me doing that. Some people like to start there because they think, hey, the vocal is the most important element of the song, which it is. So some people start there and go, I'm going to make the vocal sound fantastic, and then work my way backwards through the other elements of the mix. I do it the other way around. For the same reason, because I want the vocal to be the star of the show, I want them to come on last of all and sit on top of the mix. And so, because I work on them last, my theory is I'm going to mix the lead vocal loudest. What you mix last, you mix loudest. Tends to be something that we all do. So I will get to the lead vocal last of all. And then I can EQ the lead vocal in such a way that it sits on top of the mix. That's not to say that when I'm doing all of the instrumental elements of the mix, I'm not thinking about making space for the lead vocal. I do. I think very clearly about where the lead vocal will sit when I get to it. And so I make sure that if with all the other elements of the mix, I'm carving out space EQ-wise for the vocal to sit. So, that means I will be getting electric guitars out of the way of the vocals. I'll get horns and strings and everything else. I'll get those elements of the mix out of the way of the vocal before I get to the vocal, if you follow. So I'm already thinking about where I think the vocal shines the most, what the best elements EQ-wise are of this vocal that I'm really going to make it stand out and really going to make it sound beautiful in the context of the rest of the song. So that's why I do it that way round. But some people, for the exact same reason, will do it the other way around. They'll start with the vocal and make that glorious and then build everything else in around it. I prefer to kind of build the mix and have a nice little kind of hole, if you like, for where the vocal will sit. But there's no right, no wrong with that. It's just two completely different approaches. So I hope that kind of answers that, at least a little bit. Let's see. Let's go and take a look down at what we've got. Ken Moss is here. He says, hi all, got caught up shopping. We'll have to catch the rebroadcast later. No problem, my friend. Hope you enjoy it and hope you find it helpful. If you do, please leave a comment below, Ken. Okay? Second Tony says, I do the same. Awesome. 1080p is great, says Woodbeast. Thank you. Deirdre says, it's best to mix in mono, right, Johnny? To me, yes, but not everybody agrees with that. There is considerable debate as to whether mixing in mono is effective or helpful or not. Personally, for me, I think it is. And I think on previous shows and in discussions with Jonny on Songwriting Simplified and other shows that he and I have done together, I think I've nailed my colors to the mast on that subject fairly strongly as to why I think mixing in mono or checking your mix in mono is very, very important. For me, it means that you have to work harder at separating the elements out via EQ. You can't just go, okay, I'm going to put that guitar extreme left, that guitar extreme right, they will never meet, and it doesn't matter that there's some frequency masking going on a little bit because they're very similar sounding guitars, because they're panned out left and right wide, so they're not gonna meet. Well, yeah, they kind of are ultimately, because when people listen to records or whatever, they don't sit in this sort of triangle sweet spot like we do when we're mixing. We don't sit at the apex of a triangle, an imaginary triangle between your two speakers. People don't sit like that and listen to music. People, they'll listen on earbuds, so they'll be on their bike riding to work, or they'll be in the gym, or they'll be outdoors mowing the lawn when they're listening to music, or they will have, they'll have the music on one of those speaker bars that you can get, which is effectively a mono device anyway. And, that'll maybe be in the lounge, and they will be in the kitchen doing the dishes, or they'll be, hoovering the hallway or something with that music on in the lounge. By the time that music has reflected off of all the surfaces in that room, in wherever it is at home that they're listening, and by the time it's got to their ears, it's collapsed to mono anyway. Try that for yourself. Put a CD on. If you have a stereo unit or something like that, hi-fi, put a CD on, crank it up to a reasonable volume, and then go down the hallway into the next room. I guarantee you're not going to be able to tell whether one guitar is on the left and one guitar is on the right. You're not going to hear that. Even if there's like a stereo ping-ponging delay, you're not going to hear it, because by the time it gets to you, it's mono. So you want that music, you want that mix that you've lovingly crafted to sound great to that person listening in the next room. You want them to be able to still hear all the elements of the mix. So that includes all 5 guitars, all 5 backing vocals, the horn section, the strings, the drums, the bass, the Hammond organ, the piano, whatever is in the song. You want them to be able to hear every element wherever they are, whether they're in the bathroom, the kitchen, the toilet, wherever they are in relation to the output source. You want that mix to sound balanced. So that's, for me, why mixing in mono is important, because it means if you can get all of those elements of the mix to be clearly heard in mono, when you are in a good stereo situation, you are in the same room, it sounds extra sweet, and the mix sounds extra wide and extra big. So when you're working away in mono and then you flip the stereo button, because ultimately, hey, what is it we produce? We produce a stereo file at the end of the day that you send off to your client, because that's what we deal with. Everything is in stereo. So whilst you are, your final output is a stereo product, you are mixing in mono, to me anyway, you're mixing in mono to ensure that every aspect of your stereo file is good in terms of phase, in terms of frequency, balance, and masking, and all of that. That, for me, is why I advocate mixing in mono. So I hope that has answered that. It was quite a long answer. Let's see. I'm going to go down. Just Pop asks, do you ever take enough notes on mixes and realizes it's best to just start over from scratch? Yes, sometimes. Sometimes it is. Sometimes after I get to one of my little stop points and I go, you know what, I'm just making loads and loads of notes here. It's nowhere near where it should be. The mix is nowhere near close to the target reference track. I'm not even heading in the same direction. Yes, when I get to that point, absolutely. Sometimes the mix, my mix has gone so far off tangent I do need to start again. Or I'm, I know, here's a good case in point. I know when I need to start over, and I might just need to start over on just one track, is if I have like 3 or 4 instances of an EQ on a particular channel. Chances are I'm overthinking it if I'm doing that, and I'm over-processing it if I'm doing that. And chances are the reason why I am doing that is because my ears are getting fatigued and I'm losing my sense of perspective and I need to stop. And quite often, I take all of that processing off and I start again. After a little break, I come back to it and I start again. My equilibrium is restored, my sense of perspective is restored, and I can get into it. And sometimes that's just a single track. Hey, I just need to go do that again. Or it might be that I just go, you know what, this mix sucks. Remove everything and start again. Absolutely. If I have to do it, I'll do it. I have no pride in that respect. And I have no ego in that respect. So, I think often we need to do what is going to best serve the song that we're working on. What is going to serve that song the best? So that to me is the most important thing. So if that means you start over, it means you start over. So I hope that helps. And sometimes it might not work. Let's see. Oh, the chat just jumped. I hate when that happens. Let's see. See if I can find where we were. David says, I recently had a do-over. It ended up not coming out any better the second time. Well, you know what? If you're having that issue, where you've done a mix and then you've gone, no, this is awful, start again, and you go and you carry on, and it still doesn't sound how you want it to sound, like, stop. This is where you call a halt to mixing this song, and you go, I'm not going to work on this, and I'm going to take a day off from working on this. So you completely rest your ears, and then you come back to it the next day or a day or two later with completely fresh ears, and you listen to where you were at in the mix, and also turn everything off. Turn all of your plugins off. You've got the master on-off plugin button that activates or deactivates all inserts. Press that button, listen to everything raw, then listen to it again with all the plugins activated, so you can see kind of what you did, and has it improved the mix? Has it not improved the mix? If you decide it hasn't, then just start again. But you'll find that it will be better starting again if you've left a day or two between attempts at that mix. I've been there. I have absolutely been there. And sometimes I've had to scrap the mix 2 or 3 times before I get it coming together right. And sometimes I've been working on a song and I've gone to bed, and usually I don't know if everybody who's married here has the same experience, but usually when I try and get into bed, my wife is usually already in bed, especially if she's on call because she's a midwife. She's already usually in bed, and I'm like trying to get into bed super, super quiet and not wake her up. She wakes up anyway. And usually by that point, she's, I'll say, spent hours on this mix, not happening, not coming together at all. Don't even know if I'm going to be able to do this mix. And then I'll come back to it the next day, and I will start again with fresh ears. And, quite often takes having a day or two off from working on that song to reset my perspective. Sometimes that happens. And, that can happen to you whether you've been mixing for 5 months or 5 years or, 30 years. You can still have those moments. Yeah, and, I've been mixing since, the 1990s. That's kind of when I started getting into it in terms of mixing. But certainly in terms of recording, I was working as a recording engineer in the 1980s. But in terms of mixing, probably the mid 1990s was when I really started getting into it and learning the trade. So all of those years I've been mixing, over 20 years, and even now, with all of that experience, you'd think that I wouldn't actually have to go through that, but sometimes I do. Sometimes the song just is a stumbling block for me, and I have to sometimes go, okay, I'm taking a day off from this, and then I come back and it comes together. Usually. David says, I set a timer for 30 minutes or 35 minutes and walk away every time. Yeah, you have to find, I do 10 minutes because 10 minutes is a short period. And it means I can check my perspective because, our ears get accustomed to how something sounds very quickly. So I think having a break where you walk away every 30 minutes is a great idea. But taking a little pause after 10 minutes to check your perspective, like I've been saying, is a great thing to do. Certainly, I would definitely agree with you, David, that you should take a complete break every 30 minutes where you're not listening to anything, not listening to the mix at all, not listening to anything, no sound, just allow your ears to recalibrate. I think that's a great idea. And certainly walk away from your screen so that you allow your eyes to reset as well. I think that's a great idea. Every 30 minutes to do that. Let's see. Greg says, I kicked my family out of the house. Work's a treat. That's a good one. David says, I listen in my bathroom, which helps diagnose mid-range issues. That's really great. I do that as well because our bathroom is literally right next door to the studio here. So that's a great idea. Lollipop says, getting up and reversing your posture every 15 minutes does wonders for the body too. Yes. You can do anything for 15 minutes. It's a good stopping point. Yes, I totally agree. Totally agree with that. Kyle is here, and he says, finishing up at a steampunk weekend. Awesome. Mike at Peace Valley Audio says, I never take notes, too lazy for that. If I feel a mix isn't going good, I wipe it and start over. I reference mixes on monitors, home stereo, and car only. Well, yeah, having those 3 different speaker types is essential, in my opinion. Earbuds absolutely are essential these days as well, because a lot of people consume music listening on earbuds. If the mix doesn't sound right on earbuds, it's not right yet. You've not finished. When your mix sounds good on a variety of sources, including a mono speaker and a set of really cheap earbuds, then you've done good with the mix. But yeah, notes really for me is all about writing down what I hear that needs fixed so that I can be methodical about going and fixing those things. Because, if I go, if I just sit passively and try and make mental notes and then roll back up to my mixer and go, okay, right now I'm going to go and change that, and that. If it's not written down, for me, I will end up being less methodical about how I go about making the changes I need to make. And I might even miss something that I have referenced as, that needs fixed. But if it's written down, I know when it's done because I go do it and I check it off that list. I strike it through with a pen on my list. And that way I know that I don't miss anything. Whereas if I try and do it just by making mental notes, for me, I could easily overlook something and then that thing doesn't get changed. And then that thing could never get changed if I'm not careful because I get used to how it sounds. Even when it sounds wrong, I still get used to how it sounds. And then I send that mix off to the client and they go, you know what? That second backing vocal part just sounds really nasally. Can you change that? Oh yeah, that was the thing that I was going to change and I forgot. So I'd rather, though, that's why I make notes. And it really doesn't take up any time at all. It's a good little routine to get into. David says, I always have a reference track loaded into my session. Good. That's important. Reference tracks are essential. Let's see. Lollipop says, I haven't done a full mix yet, but found it useful to type notes into the editor notes section. That's a good way to do it as well. Michael says, talking to Peace Valley Audio says, I used to be like that, but I found taking notes and using reference tracks was night and day. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, everyone has a workflow that works best for them. Totally. Mike says, I don't like reference tracks. I don't want to sound like someone else. I want to sound like me. Absolutely. Absolutely. You want to sound like you. Definitely. But if the client is asking for, hey, I would like my mix, I would like my song to have this kind of vibe to it and refer to a particular song, then that guides you because that's what the client is asking for. And it's not about sounding like somebody else or sounding not like you or anything like that. It's about, nobody is an island. We're not on our own here. And, what to you might sound like it's an amazing mix. When you compare it to somebody like Chris Lord-Alge, or you compare it to somebody like Andrew Sheps, in the same kind of style, the same kind of instrumentation, it helps you learn what you need to learn. If I compare my mix to one of Sheps's mix in the same kind of style with the same kind of instrumentation, I can compare, actually, I really like how he has dealt with the kick drum. Kick drum sounds really, really big and punchy, and it sounds great. How can I make mine sound like that? So that's where I will kind of listen and think and listen to what I think he's done EQ-wise with that kick drum, and then I will go and make similar changes EQ-wise to my kick drum, and I'll compare my kick drum to his, and go, yeah, that's good. That's good. That way I'm learning from somebody else. I'm not wanting to be like Andrew Sheps, and I'm not wanting to mix in his style. But if a client has said, hey, I really like this song, I would like my song to have this kind of vibe to it, this kind of sound overall to it, then that's my reference. That's what the client wants overall. So that's what I aim for. Does that mean I'm going to make all my adjustments to make my mix sound exactly like that reference track? No. I don't want to sound exactly like that reference track. I'm not going to sit and listen to the reference track and do a spectrographic analysis of it. That's not what I do. That's not what a reference track is for, I think. A reference track, I think, and certainly with my clients, is to do with how they want their product. Because at the end of the day, it's their song, it's their product. How they would like it to, the kind of vibe they would like that song to have. If I get close to that, and that's what I aim for, I aim to get as close as I can to making the sound overall similar, then the client is happy and I'm happy, because that means that client is more likely to come back and want to work with me again. So, that's where reference tracking for me is important. Now, even if you're not a professional, even if you don't have paying clients, reference tracks are useful because they can teach you. They can teach you and enable you to get better at what you do. Comparing your mix to somebody else's mix is invaluable. I mean, in any art, it's invaluable to learn from a master. How did I improve as a bass player? I learned from people like Jaco Pastorius. I learned from, James Jameson and people like that, or Chuck Rainey. Chuck Rainey is a fantastic example for me because he is such a good, solid pocket bass player, and has such a fantastic fat groove, and which is why he's on so many hit records, and which is why he has so many Grammy Awards for his bass playing. He's just a terrific bass player, and he's a number one call for just about every great artist that there has ever been. It's not that I want to sound like Chuck Rainey. No, I don't. I want to sound like me. But there are things that I can learn from him that will make me a better bass player. There are techniques that he uses and there are things that he applies and methods of playing that I can adapt to my playing and make my own. So it's not about sounding like somebody else. It's about taking from other people who are great and making it your own. So you develop your own voice, you develop your own style, you develop your own sound. Nobody develops their own style and their own sound in isolation. And I think a case in point here would be Charlie Parker, the great alto sax player who pretty much changed jazz in the 1940s. And he certainly changed how people play saxophone. Absolutely, he did. And he was greatly influenced by a saxophone player called Lester Young, who was a tenor sax player. But he was greatly influenced by his approach to harmony and his approach to rhythm. And so he took what he learned from Lester Young and then he made it his own, and he added his own kind of innovations to the innovations that Lester Young had already pioneered, and he created a unique and distinctive sound that nobody else had, and became a great saxophone player in his own right that his mentor, Lester Young, looked up to and admired. So, same could be said for Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix took a lot of inspiration from other musicians and other instrumentalists. I know I'm kind of laboring this point, but I think it's really, really important that, we take from different people and we learn from them and we apply what we learn from them, not to become clones of them, but to develop our own sound, our own voice, what makes us distinctive and unique as a musician, as an arranger, as a composer, as a songwriter, as a mix engineer, whatever that might be. So I know I'm kind of laboring it a little bit, and I don't mean to, but I think I just think it's just that important. Let's see. Michael asked, do you ever sidechain instruments for the vocals so they duck to let the vocals sound out? Yes, I have done that. There's I don't do that in every mix, because I think that approach really only works with certain genres. I think certainly in a more rock orientated song or pop orientated song, I think sidechaining, so that the the band ducks a little when the vocal is singing, and then pokes back through when the vocal is not singing. I think that's a great little trick. My advice with doing that really is to make it subtle. You don't want that ducking to be heard. You want it to be enough that it makes the vocal just poke out a little bit more. So yes, I have done that where I route everything to a bus, which I call all band, or I call it a band bus. So all the instrumental stuff gets routed to that bus, which is a band bus, and then I have a vocal bus, and then I sidechain the vocal to the band bus, and then every time the vocal sings, the band is compressed a tiny little bit, maybe by a dB or two. And then you just set the attack and release so that it's nice and smooth and subtle. But yes, I have done that. Just Bob says, 1, work out music, chords, notes, to record, take break. 2, give half hour to listen, re-record and EQ, break again. Step 3, do 2 more half-hour sessions, stop for the day on those tracks, maybe work on another instrument. Yes, I think it's a great way to do it. Mike says, I guess the best way I could say it is I go with my gut feeling. And gut feeling is really, really important as well. Definitely important to go with how, what your instincts tell you about the mix. But you have to remember that your gut instincts are influenced by what you are hearing, what you're listening to. So your gut instinct isn't necessarily always going to be objectively right. Sometimes it is, but not always. So gut instinct is a great thing to be aware of and pay attention to, because quite oftentimes it may well be right. John says, where do you leave a comment? Below the video. Yeah, like you would on any YouTube video. Any YouTube video you watch, there's always a comment section where you can leave a comment. So absolutely you can do that. And you can do that on this one. It's a live stream, but a live stream essentially is a video like any other video on YouTube. We are at 1:05, so I'm going to wrap this up very, very soon. Let's see. But I want to make sure I get to every question here as much as possible. Oh. Let's see if I can get these last ones in. You can't on a live stream. Yeah, you can't on. You have to wait until the stream is done. Let's see. Lollipop says, do you know in advance of approaching these tracks what frequencies to cut and what for what instruments before erasing them? Before erasing them? I wouldn't erase any tracks. Not quite sure what you mean there. But do I know in advance of approaching these tracks what frequencies to cut? Sometimes I have go-to EQs that I would use. I have go-to compressors that I would use. Does that mean that that's necessarily the right choice for that particular channel in that particular mix? Not always. So, for as much as I have routines and, I have a particular way of approaching a vocal, like I would use X EQ and Y compressor into Z compressor. And that's kind of my standard go-to methodology for mixing vocals. Whilst it's important to have those kind of things, because those things will speed up your process, does that necessarily mean that that is actually the right EQ for this song? It might not be. It might well be that a Neve EQ is what you need rather than a Pultec EQ. or an SSL channel strip might well actually be better, or a Focusrite channel strip might well actually be what you need rather than what you're currently doing. So yes, I think it's important to know what, generally speaking, each element of the mix needs. Like, you know, how would I mix an acoustic guitar? Well, I would mix an acoustic guitar different if it was solo, or if it was just vocal and acoustic guitar. I would mix the acoustic guitar different in that context from how I would mix it in the context of a much bigger song. Depends on how important those elements are as well. That's another thing to consider. You know, if the acoustic guitar is there to kind of provide texture, it's not an upfront thing, I would probably mix the acoustic guitar darker than I normally would. So I might make an acoustic guitar, when you hit the solo button on that acoustic guitar, you think, gosh, that really sounds dark and dull and lifeless. Well, yeah, on its own it does, but in the context of this particular song, it probably is exactly what's necessary. You know, it's not an upfront element. It's meant to be in the background, so I'm going to make it dark, or darker, should I say, compared to those elements that are up front, because those elements that are up front, I will make a little bit brighter than everything else so that they poke through the mix a bit more. So, you know, whilst I have a general picture in my mind of, okay, this is an acoustic guitar, this is kind of how I like an acoustic guitar to sound, that's my starting point, and then I go from there and go, that's how I like it to sound, but this is how it needs to sound for this track. So I hope that has helped, and I think we are at the bottom, are we? Or are we near the bottom? Let's see. It's not scrolling. Come on, chat, scroll for me, please. Okay, I think we've got to the end of the chat. So I think I've got to all of your questions. I hope you found all of that really useful and informative. I do try my best to be helpful and informative. So if you've liked this show, please do hit the like button. Also consider hitting the super chat button as well. I always appreciate those because they help me get things like extra lights, which is what I now have. So I am lit up like a Christmas tree, and so the quality of the my live shows gets better. So yeah, please do consider doing those kind of things. You guys have been phenomenally generous this year, by the way. That's something I really should say from the outset, is that you guys have been smacking that super chat button of late, and it's allowed me to do a whole bunch of stuff that I couldn't have done, and stuff that I've still got plans to do with those donations, like improving quality of audio, quality of the picture as well. So I'm looking at new cameras and stuff. I'm also looking at more RAM for my computer. I've only got 8 gigs of RAM, and I know that it'd be helpful to get a couple more sticks so that I could go up to 16. I also I'm looking at going up to Windows 10 Pro. So your donations help make these kind of things possible and enable me to serve you guys better and make better quality videos, and so on and so forth. So I hope this has been helpful, and we are coming up on 10 past 1 in the morning here, and the only other thing I've really got to say is watch out for videos coming up over the course of the next several weeks. I've got a list of videos which I'm working my way through, and I'm aiming to get those up on Thursday or Friday. Excuse me. So I hope you find those all helpful and useful. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you will always know when I put a video out, or when Songwriting Simplified is, not Songwriting Simplified, Sunday Night Live. I don't do Songwriting Simplified on this channel, except I have done sometimes. But yeah, I hope all of this has been really helpful for you. And I will see you all on Wednesday on the Home Studio Trainer YouTube channel for Songwriting Simplified. Looking forward to it. See you then, folks. Good night. And this is where I forget where my button is. There we go. Good night, everybody.